Forgive us, Father, for we have sinned. Sorry, Daddy. We've been bad. We have impure thoughts. But this is not a place for impure thoughts. The kind of newfangled pervert content we discuss on this channel has no business here. This is a place of history, majesty, and awe. Just look at the magnificent carvings, echoes of eternity, that 15th century medieval monks left on the pews. What the f*** is that? Norwich Cathedral is one of the largest cathedrals in England. It was completed sometime between 1121 and 1145, and it didn't take long after that for things to get weird. These are misericords, which means mercy seats or pity seats. I'm told that during services, monks would sometimes have to stand for hours at a time. These mercy seats were a way for the monks to look as if they were fully standing, when in reality they were able to rest a little. Underneath each mercy seat is a different carving. Some are religious, some are mythological, and some are spankings. I've asked around to learn as much as I can about this carving, but the truth is not much is known. I do know that it was carved in the year 1412, the same year Joan of Arc was born. I also know that the heads of the figures on this carving were chiseled off during the iconoclasm of the Protestant Reformation. I also know there was a monastic school at the cathedral during this time, so it's safe to assume this carving is a depiction of that. But you've got to admit, if you're going to carve a school scene onto your 15th century cathedral, it's pretty flippin' weird to choose this specific scene. There aren't that many misericord carvings inside the cathedral, and yet somehow this made the cut. My point is, apparently some monk really wanted to think about spankings while he was at work. Sound familiar? But there's more to Spanko history than just one slap-happy 15th century East Anglian monk. One of the oldest examples of historical spanking porn that I'm aware of is an Italian fresco from the year 490. It's called the Tomb of the Whipping, and its most memorable feature is a fresco of two men giving a woman a flogging that is clearly erotic. After that, Spanko history becomes... Look, I'm not going to sugarcoat it for you guys. Spanko history gets a little bit embarrassing. In the late 1600s and early 1700s, there were at least two serial attackers operating in the London area. It is always in England. Who would approach unaccompanied women and spank them before fleeing. This is not our finest moment, people. The philosopher Jean-Jacques Rousseau, who lived in the 1700s, had a pretty serious spanking fetish. But he also didn't handle it very well. According to his autobiography, Rousseau used to hide in dark alleys and reveal his bare bottom to strange women walking by in the hopes that they would smack it. I do not recommend this tactic, people. This is not the way to de-lurk. But the ethics of responsible and consensual play weren't the only thing Rousseau was super wrong about. Unfortunately, he also thought his fetish was caused by child abuse. Rousseau wrote, quote, "Who would believe this childish discipline, received at 8 years old from the hands of a woman of 30, should influence my propensities, my desires, my passions, for the rest of my life?" Rousseau needed to subscribe to my YouTube channel. Fetishes are not caused by trauma. Link in the description. Around the same time, one of the first collections of spanking stories was published in England. Of course. It was called The Birchen Bouquet, Curious and Original Anecdotes of Ladies Fond of Administering Birch Discipline. And it's basically a bunch of FF spanking stories. Let's take a look, shall we?
Finding the door locked and the key out, she looked through the keyhole, where she saw Miss Lucy seated in the middle of the room on a low stool, and Harriet lying across her knees with her petticoats and shift turned up over the other to the middle of her waist, and her niece whipping her bottom with all her might.
Yep, this is some pretty down-the-line standard Spanko content. Let's check our bingo cards. We've got an OTK spanking with an implement on a victim's bare bottom. Apparently Spankos in 1770 were super obsessed with the word bottom, and today, not much has changed. This spanking is disciplinary, includes non-sexual touching, non-sexual, and takes place between two people with a platonic relationship, and of course, the author is anonymous. To be fair, he probably had like a really high profile job. And that's bingo! This is some standard Spanko content coming at us straight from the 1770s. Change Miss Lucy to Qui-Gon Jinn and Harriet to Obi-Wan Kenobi, and you've basically got the entirety of my internal adolescent erotic life. Isn't Spanko history fun? Spanko history is fun! I don't know, I can't... Spanko history is fun. This is the last time I'll be in England for a little while, so I wanted to make sure you guys got the chance to see this carving. And if any of you happen to pass through Norwich, you should totally come check it out. It's pretty weird. I want to end with the story of how we found this carving in the first place, because, you know, it's like not easy to stumble across. 3 years ago, I came to Norwich for the first time to visit Dan. The Norwich Cathedral is pretty much the best tourist attraction in town, so of course, Dan brought me to see it.
I was born in Norwich. I grew up here obsessing about spanking the whole time, but I had no idea this carving was here.
So we went into the cathedral and I wandered off to take pictures of a stained glass window or whatever, when suddenly, from across the cathedral, I hear Dan say, really loudly, "How did you know?"
What happened was, a docent had walked up to me, grabbed my arm, pointed at Jilly, and said, "Mate, you have to show her this."
I heard what Dan had said, of course, but I had no idea what they were talking about.
Honestly, I was wondering if you'd recognized her or something.
So I walked over to them and Dan was just in shock. The docent turned to me and said, "Look at this." So I looked down and yeah, I knew immediately what I was looking at. But like 3 decades of pretending I'm not always thinking about spanking kicked in, and I pretended I didn't. I played dumb. So I was like, "What's that?"
And the docent said, "It's a monk with a student over his knee for a hard, bare bottom spanking."
Yeah, we have definitely wondered about this docent. And that, my friends, was my first trip to Dan's hometown. Hail Britannia.